so good. Do. Don't let the muggles get you down. No, child, don't. Really don't let the muggles get you down. So I'm like a Harry Potter fan, but in the muggle world, we do see a lot of craziness going on. Part of what I've experienced is anxiety. I think I told you guys this. But I think that anxiety is at an ultimate high for people. And I think it's just because we're seeing such a polarity arising everywhere. The polarities of thought processes and how we engage people, and kind of crazy how we went from like unity right into oh, sorry. We went into unity into a distinct polarities, and how we let go of all that we had talked about, which was coming and joining together. And then in a blink of an eye, people were raging war against each other. Human condition, human mind is super fragile. And, we know that the mind is fragile, and that the ego is a very tricky thing. And sometimes the ego finds its way in places we don't even understand. And then we realize that we're operating through ego. And then, boom, it's just like this awakening, like this wave. And we're like, that was the ego in operation. It happens to me all the time. And the deeper in the skill that you get at recognizing your ego and allowing your ego to rise, then the trickier it becomes. It's like a survival technique. So think about it like in nature. When we have animals who want to continue to survive, what do? They morph, they change, everything starts to go differently. And so when that happens and they start to adapt and they start to shift and morph into something different, what ends up happening is, hold on 1 second, I'm trying to do this, is they change and transform for survival. And that, like the ego itself, will do that with individuals. And it's super, super, super tricky. And I say tricky because it makes its way in places that we don't even understand. Oh, sorry. Give me just a second here. There we go. Boom. I want to see if anybody's on here live. There we go. Okay. So no one's on here. So I say good morning to people. And I am switching my time, so we'll see if I catch early morning birdies. If not, we'll see. So the ego. Let's continue talking about that and how it does its little tricky thing. So you're, going along and you're doing your whatever it is, your daily tasks, all that stuff, and then something is in operation, and these patterns show up in our lives that they come through the subconscious mind. But someone enters a room, you engage with that energy leaves, you engage with the next energy, and somehow you can absorb the energy of the other individual. Now the ego itself, is it bad? No. But in operation, when we're not aware of what's in operation, it can be our worst enemy, but we could also use it and utilize it to help us we can become friends with it, basically. And what it does is, so those feel-good feelings, right, where people are proud of you, you can say yes and be humble. That humility could be ego, right? But the pride also could be ego. So anything that we experience that entices us back into what I call the programming of society, the programming of this world or this three-dimensional time space, when we get called forth back into that programming, right, that's literally the ego drawing us back in. Now, it's not a bad thing. The ego helps us in different ways, right? And it unfolds and reveals itself in different ways. But sometimes when it shows up, we're unaware that it's in operation. And I've had a couple of talks with individuals because sometimes we can see other people's egos better than our own ego. And that's why I like to have a coach, because oftentimes they're able to sort of maneuver you away from that. It's almost like if you're stagnant or in a place or in an environment where things aren't shifting, how do you start to shift out of it? And sometimes it's you perpetuating the cycle of that stagnation. You're the one who's in fact, I had this experience yesterday. I'm like, this anxiety energy that's being recycled over and over and over again. It's what happens when the energy is recycled. So I've been getting coaching. I've had one coaching call, and in the coaching, that was something that was actually talked about, was how the energy perpetuates through individuals. But what it does is it time traps you and you get sucked into a vortex of recycled energy that stays stagnant. And because the energy is stagnant and not moving somewhere, everybody in that space that is sucked into that space ends up being stagnant and not moving. So really, in the practice myself, to try to understand how to move the energy. How do I move the energy and ground it and allow it to move through me? Not an easy task. Definitely open to trying practices to get that going, because anxiety is something that I've been experiencing. And so literally I have spoke authentically, right, to individuals, to people, about how that anxiety is showing up, and had individual conversations to speak authentically why I feel that anxiety is showing up and where I think I'm receiving it from, and then how it's perpetuating and how we can work together to transcend it or to ground it or to allow it to move through us. So think about your home environment for one. If you think about your home environment, so in your space, and it could be work environment. I don't know how many people are actually at a job where they're sharing space with individuals, but think about you sharing a space, unless you live alone. And in that space, the energies that are, there. And asking yourself if the energy is flowing and there's movement, or asking yourself if the energy is stuck and stagnant, and what is the experience. Oftentimes, stuck energy feels like the negative polarity, which are, anxiety, frustration, anger, like that gets perpetuated, and that seems to suck us into the vortex. If we're happy, or we're experiencing happy emotions, we don't typically get sucked in. We could. I know I could, especially when my bestie, if he was ever on here, when my bestie plays music, then I get stuck in wanting to stay up dancing all night, and then like, woo, yay, life is great, and get stuck in that cycle, and then where I have to go to bed or do something. So you can get stuck in that energy as well, but typically the experience is not unpleasurable. It's usually a pleasure, but too much of it can lead to the discomfort. So the stagnation of the energy being anxiety, fear or anger or whatever, that keeps us trapped. It also takes up time and space. So looking at that, right, wrong, good, or bad, well, it's neither. It's neither right, wrong, good, or bad. It just is. But if we don't recognize it and understand how to maneuver through that energy and allow that energy to not be so stuck, then we can allow ourselves to get the tasks we need to get done, and from a place of harmony. Because we can still, like for instance, we can still say we're going to get a lot of things done, or maybe we're not stagnant in the body. Maybe the body's, moves forward. Maybe we have to go to work. Maybe we have to do grocery shopping. Maybe we have all these things we have to do, but we're carrying around with us that anger, frustration, and all that. So the stagnation may not happen in the body, but the mental stagnation, the emotional stagnation that happens in the body, in our thought processes. So maybe we go to the store and we're moving our body, but the energy that we're taking with us to the store and the thought process and the stories that are running are keeping us in that cycle. And then they're taking our energy away and our thought process away from what? From co-creating, from being in a creative space. Because really that's what it does. It allows us to be creative. It allows us to open up opportunities to exist. Literally, that's where opportunities exist. Opportunities exist when we allow ourselves, right, to open up the space. When we have space, creativity exists. When we don't have space, we can't be creative. Think about it as like a painting studio. Let's just say every inch of it is covered and there's no space, and you have no space to put up your canvas, but you need a space to put up your canvas, right? So that you can then start to paint. You need a place to put your paints so that you can mix colors. If it's all cluttered up, how are you going to create the masterpiece that you want? So you open up the space and you allow there to be room so that you can put your stuff together. So I want to see if this is yeah. Okay, cool. I'm just like making sure that all this technical stuff is working. I think I finally got it. I think I finally understand how to get everything connected. And it's super early, so I think no one's awake at this time. So, or they're typically, I do about 7:30. Trying to go on even earlier than this. Okay, so the stagnation. And looking at the space. So for me, and I've said this before, I have practices in place. Of course, it's principle practice of how to move energy. Now, anxiety is one that I don't know how to move through. Okay. Good morning, Renee. I don't understand or know how to move through anxiety just yet, but I'm learning how to do that. I'm trying to understand what needs to happen. So breath work, I've been doing that. Going outside and trying to ground my energy into the earth and allow that energy to radiate out, right? Allow it to flow through me. And also just to be present to what the experience is of anxiety. There is something that I will say, anxiety and excitement sort of feel the same. We experience them sort of the same. So I think about like a roller coaster, right? Going up. That's the worst part for me, really. I love roller coasters, but the going up always gives me some sort of excitement, right? And the excitement comes in the gut in a form of like feeling kind of nauseous in a way. I don't know how to explain it. It's like, and then it moves up to the heart, and then the heart starts to race. And it almost feels like your heart's going to jump out of your chest. And that's how I feel with anxiety. I don't know how everybody else feels when they're having their anxiety, but my experience is that the heart starts to pound, right? And pulse. And it feels like it's just going to jump right out of my chest. And then moving from that, right? And then the excitement once you go through the roller coaster is really allowing yourself to surrender to the experience. So looking at anxiety, good morning, Euless, is that understanding that the anxiety is feels similar to excitement. So if I can understand that emotion, I can move through it. And I will say that I allowed myself to move through anxiety for a couple of days. Before I was like, oh my God, I need something. I don't know what I need. So, I was trying to take, I've been taking some like cortisol stuff to drop my cortisol levels because I think they're kind of too high. Typically I work out. I do all these other things to try to release that energy. But it's just entangled inside. And so the experience is new for me. Never had so much anxiety in my life. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that, I'm just trying new things in my life, like relationship, which is a new thing, which is, ignited some anxiety in me. It really has. And probably because I'm just not used to the experience or having somebody else in my life with me that way. But understanding that relationship, hopefully, fingers crossed, can work out while being in this work, which is it's not an easy task. Okay. It's getting better, but there's still those painful parts that have caused some sort of an emotional upheaval. So again, understanding how to take that energy and then how to switch it and refocus the energy or move the energy or allow it to flow through me like the river. Which is not, I guess, anxiety is one of the hardest things, I think, to allow your body to experience and be with the emotion rather than trying to avoid it or get rid of it. And understanding how to work with it, right? So I'm in the practice of that, and I can tell you that communicating authentically, even in even with getting feedback that you don't want to hear, has been super helpful for me. So being able to drop into my heart, being able to have that open line of communication, being able to go to people authentically and say, here's what's coming up for me, because part of that anxiety is the it's anxious for me because it's this fear of being able to communicate to somebody about why the anxiety is there. Could be shame, insecurity, perhaps. That's really is rooted in insecurity. That if I were to truly speak about where the anxiety is coming from, that it may not be accepted. Good morning, Suze. How are you? And that the receiving end might reject it. Well, rejection is good for me though, because I understand rejection really well and I know how to use that energy. But anxiety is a whole other ballpark. So, for those of you who have experienced anxiety your entire life, I just want to say that I'm so sorry. I have never really had anxiety the way I've been having it in my life. It's a very new emotional experience, except that it does feel like excitement. And I had a lot of excitement. The only difference being probably the lungs seem to feel like I can't breathe. Excitement doesn't necessarily give me that sensation. I think that's probably what makes it a little bit more difficult to work through. So breath work has been critical and important, but literally speaking. And we know that speaking utilizes the vocal cord, utilizes the breath. So it allows us to open up that space to take in air, right? It's like when you're working out, they say sing along or count. That's why, aerobics instructors or whatever, they have you count off things because they want you to breathe. And when we talk, we have to breathe. We have to take in breaths. So that also laughter. I think yesterday I just came to a point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, and it wasn't a giving up. It was more like, this is hilarious. I'm not giving into these stories. I'm not going to give into it. It's ludicrous. It's ridiculous. It's a drama, and I'm not going to live into this drama. It's not going to happen. Like, I I mean, literally had to laugh. Like, I just broke down and started laughing. Now, on the receiving end of that wasn't very good. The person receiving the laughter, and I apologize, but in order for me to get over my shit, I had to be able to see it as a comedy. Like, this is not that serious. But, that's the way that I handled it, because mostly people take life seriously. And sometimes a little bit too seriously, sometimes to the extremity. And then they forget that life can be fun and that it can be playful. Getting your master's and getting into relations are anxious times. Thanks, Suze. Yeah. Thank you for understanding. It is. And the master's program I'm very excited about. It's the time. I think that's probably the biggest point of, if I say anxiety for me, because thinking about the time frame, and they asked us in our program, like, what are your fears, and my fear was like, will I have enough time to get everything done? Because stepping into a new relationship, which I've been alone pretty much my whole life, having my job that's full-time, and then being in a master's program. But there was a lady who's like, I have 7 kids and da da da. So I'm like, okay, then these people with children, I think that's even harder. So although I'll tell you that the relationship seems a lot like what I would be like to have. I don't know. It's not easy for me. Relationship's not an easy one for me. It might be for some. So it becomes a challenge for me. But yes, you're right. I think that's the big changes in my life, and starting to see a shift and feel a shift in the energy, and doing it intentionally, so that there's not stagnation of and perpetuated anxiety in the household. And also, you know, there's just a lot going on in my household, with there's a lot of people, a lot of big personalities here, and a lot of change and transformation in relationships here. So things are shifting at a very, very, very fast pace, and because of that, it's igniting some emotional trauma that was probably deeply seated and rooted very, very deeply. And so looking at that and understanding that. So I would just say for you guys, if you're working through anxiety or whatever you're working through, that sometimes we think, oh, we're done. We're okay with that story. That, and then you'll find that there's more to it than just what you thought, and digging deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, which is really good because it's almost like getting to the DNA and restructuring of it. But what you're doing is restructuring your mind and allowing yourself to receive new information that serves you and your worldview, and serves you in creating and manifesting what it is you choose to create in your life. So again, opening up the space for creation. Really, it's what it's about. Allowing yourself to flow into that, and to also feel the abundance in all aspects of your life. So abundance in love, abundance in resources, abundance in your studies, abundance in your health, you know, abundance in your food, which I guess could be resources. So understanding that, right, is when we open up the space, we allow the abundance to come in. When there's too much clutter, it can't. So allowing that to be open so that we can create something different, a new environment, a new way of approaching it, and then maybe even new relationships, or newfound understandings with individuals. Like, for instance, yesterday I had a very profound understanding with my niece, and so that was good. And it was the ability to speak authentically and open up my heart and say, okay, here's what's going on, and really understand that and care and nurture for you know, a child, because she's a child. I feel like she's my child, and really teach, but to not be able to communicate or open up my heart and communicate what the experience is, then I would have just held on to that, right? And then who knows how it would have showed up, more distorted. And so instead, being able to say, okay, here's what's going on, here's how I feel, here's what I think, here's my experience. I get that it's not real. I get that it's not you, and those are my emotions. However, this is what my experience is. And then on the receiving end of, well, here's my experience. Okay, well, that's cool. You get to have your experience. I'm not going to take that away from you. Now, remember, your experience doesn't make it true. And just because you experience an individual a certain way doesn't mean that that's who they are. They're not truly that. That's just the feeling that you have of their expression of who they are, okay? So if you are dealing with anxiety, first of all, again, I'm really, really sorry. It's not fun. Number two, there is a way to maneuver through it, not to work against it, not to deny it, not to act as though it doesn't exist, and not to just sweep it under the rug or take some sort of medication to make it go away. That you can handle it through your practices if you know how. Now, if you are on medication through a doctor, I'm not a doctor, so don't listen to me. I'm going to just say that right off the bat, because I don't want people to feel like they're wrong if they are taking medication for anxiety. I'm just saying that we can learn how to work with it rather than against it, or rather than shutting it off. That we can utilize the anxiety and live in the experience of it without making that energy wrong. I mean, the reason we feel it is because we we have a sympathetic system that ignites that energy in us for a purpose. Now, sometimes it's ignited and there's really no reason for it to be ignited. So we can look at that and say, well, why has that been triggered? Why am I experiencing this at this time if I'm not like trying to run from a bear? I mean, that's the feeling of anxiety, right? It's like the fear of death or the fear of something. Usually it's the fear. My friend was saying, like, it's because you're projecting future. You're thinking about the future. You're thinking about, and I think that that's partially correct, but it's also thinking about the scenarios that can play out, which again is stuck in the future. So bring yourself, into the present and allow yourself to feel the energy move through you and out of you, but not trying to get rid of it, just allowing it to flow through you. Because, like that saying, this too shall pass. When we try to put it dormant and act as though it doesn't exist or cover it up with something, then when we uncover or take the lid off, it just, or sometimes it just overflows anyway. The lid pops off because it's too much. So there you go. Hopefully you guys didn't get anxiety from this podcast, but understanding how to work with anxiety, understanding how to create and shape new environments, understanding that you have the power to open up the space to create, and that you don't have to stay stagnant in a particular energy. Remembering that energies that do keep us trapped in stagnation typically are energies that don't feel good. They're the anger, the frustration, the ones that we don't want to deal with. Letting go of controlling and letting it be. Yep. That's right. Letting go. That's a big one. Just letting it be. Like, there was a point I was like, I let go and I let it go. I'm like, I can't. Number one. Number two, I started laughing. I just was like, I can't, this is ridiculous. Like, it's no. And then laughing, but be careful with the laughter because it can hurt other people. That's not nice. I felt really bad, but I'm like, look, I just need, like, my life is not that serious. I'm not going to be that serious. Yeah. Laughter is the best breath. You're right. That's probably why, too. I need some real breath because that anxiety is holding my chest really tight. Yes. So having laughter. So it's been a challenge. Things are interesting, but they're starting to shift a little at a time. They're shifting just a little baby steps. And before you know it, there's a masterpiece again that's created. After the little baby shifts, this is the fine tuning and the understanding. And then once that is done and you've fine tuned everything, right, then you have perhaps a moment in time where everything's synergized. But it won't stay there forever. It's like a brand new car. You get the car, it's running good, everything's good. I got the oil, the this, the that, the this. And then all of a sudden one day you're fine tuning, and it's really great. And then boom, falls apart. And you're like, dang, I have to fine tune it again. So it's the same thing. Constantly tightening those bolts, changing the oil, all that kind of stuff. Doing the same thing with yourself and then fine-tuning it so that you can have those experiences of balance and harmony. They won't last forever because we know that in this world, things pull us in different directions and ways and stuff. We can't just stay balanced. I mean, we could if we went to the mountains or to an ashram, like I said, and just sit there in meditation. But still, they have to move around, right? The monks and all that still have to do their daily tasks. They just learn how to be with their self and their energy. And then they still have to fine tune. So, no, nothing's perfect here. It's just a constant change and shift of energy, okay? So learn to love the energy. Let it move through you. Let it be with you. And then also you guys are not going crazy. It's just a very, 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 very hard time. Thank you, Suze. Thank you for motivating me. You're always giving me motivation and I appreciate it very much. Okay, so there you have it. I love you guys. It is Tuesday. I'm trying to get up earlier and earlier and earlier. Perhaps smaller amount of people show up here. Fine. But I have a lot going on, so Spirit and Coffee gets to be the first thing I do in the morning. And then perhaps I'll take a little 30-minute break and then get to the other stuff. Okay, so I love you guys. Have a great day. I will be seeing y'all tomorrow. And don't let the muggles get you down.